The first question that we'll take is from Sarah, who is asking, what are the rational proofs of prophecy? Are the miracles of the prophets the strongest proofs of their prophethood?
Well, they're temporal miracles, and then there's miracles that stay with us. One of the greatest miracles of the Prophet ﷺ is the Sahaba. Because if you just study the lives of the Sahaba, how do you get all those people at the same time in one place? Men and women, some of the most extraordinary people that ever lived. I mean, Umar ibn al-Khattab, in the 100 most influential people in human history, Umar ibn al-Khattab is in there, according to the Prophet ﷺ, according to the historian Michael Hart, was #1. And he was Jewish historian. I think he was being very fair. But he puts Omar in there also as one of the most influential. I mean, how is that possible? Omar is a product of prophetic molding. So the transformation of, the alchemical transformation of lead to gold that occurs amongst the companions of the Prophet. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, from a tribe of really brigands, and just becomes so upright that he can't even live with people anymore. I mean, it's just amazing. Or somebody like Aisha. Aisha had the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, we can't even imagine it, but, had the Prophet ﷺ never come, who is Aisha? Aisha, nobody would ever know a name like Aisha bint Abi Bakr, and yet she's one of the most important women in human history. And she's influenced countless people, men and women. So she's amazing. So, I mean, the greatest miracle, according to our tradition, is the Quran itself. But to understand that miracle takes a considerable amount of time to really, to penetrate its mysteries and to penetrate some of its mysteries and get a glimpse of it. It takes a long time. But the more you study, the more miraculous it becomes. That's undeniable. But one of the great miracles of the Quran is the fact that the Ajam can memorize it without knowing what it means. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهْمٍ مُدَّكِرٍ. And we made this book easy to remember. And you see people that memorize it perfectly. And then another miracle of the Quran is tajweed. Because why is it that people, I've met Pakistanis that can't speak Arabic except with an accent, and yet they can recite the Quran with perfect tajweed. It's amazing. I mean, how is it that people can learn? And then also how is it, we don't know how the Torah was originally recited at the time of Moses. We don't know how the Greek of the New Testament was recited. And I had 2 years of Greek, and the Greek teacher told us on more than one occasion, we think it was pronounced this way, we don't know. So even the Greek, Koine Greek of the New Testament is we don't have a tajweed of it, like orthoepy, I think they call it. So tajweed is a miracle of Islam. And then the Prophet ﷺ's, like, where do you get the Taj Mahal and the Alhambra Palace? I mean, how is it that beauty, Western beauty of Islam, Spain, when they show brochures to visit Spain, they show the Alhambra Palace. That was built by Muslims, it wasn't built by Christians. And then when they show Hindus, when they show their tourist things to visit India, they show a Muslim mosque. And then the Jews, when they show their brochures to visit Israel, they show a mosque that Muslims built. Like, how is the, why, what's so amazing about it? Because it's what civilization created those. Like, what was in the souls of those people that came out of them? Early on, too. I mean, Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan, that's very early. And I heard a lecture on Al-Quds, because, I mean, even though we know Masjid al-Aqsa is actually another part of the mount, but the Bayt al-Maqdis, where the prophets had the Isra and the Mi'raj. Rather, it was the Isra was to it, and then the Mi'raj was from it. But so I heard this amazing architect in Colorado, and he was a student of Keith Critchlow, who's a famous sacred geometrician that studied Islamic art. And he was explaining how this is almost a perfect building. There's only one problem architecturally. There's not an intermediary. Because if you look at most buildings, they would have a little, between the dome and the base, there would be an intermediary. So that's like heaven and earth, and then you have an intermediary. So when he finished the lecture, I went up to him and I said, I think you're totally wrong about that. He said, what? He said, well, architecturally, we would see that as a flaw in the structure because that intermediary base wasn't there. I said, but that mosque symbolizes a man who went to heaven and had no intermediary, because even Jibril had to leave him. And so it's actually perfect if you want to, it's the meeting of heaven and earth. So he was like, that's a very interesting point. So anyway, that's, I think those are miracles of our prophet. And Dalail and Nubuwwah was very important. But another miracle is all of his incredible statements about the end of time. Incredible, I say incredible, but they're credible for us. We believe them. They might be incredible for other people, because incredible means unbelievable, but we believe them. But I'm using it hyperbolically. So anyway, the Prophet ﷺ told us, who told the Prophet that the buildings in Mecca would reach the tips of the mountains? Like, who could have imagined that in the 7th century, to have skyscrapers that reached the tips of the mountains? Who told the Prophet ﷺ that the mountains of Mecca would have tunnels? إِذَا بُعِجَتْ كَظَائِمُ مَكَّةَ. I mean, that's in a hadith. When the mountains of Mecca, when the base is drilled open, bu'ijat means to like pierce, right? So who told the Prophet ﷺ that? Who told the Prophet ﷺ that women would wear spandex towards the latter days? Because they didn't understand that hadith, kasiyatun ariyat, dressed and undressed at the same time. We understand that, unfortunately, right? I mean, we understand that. But who would have understood that in the 7th century Arabia? Read the tafsir, they didn't understand it. They're like, how could you be dressed and naked at the same time? So they said things like, kasiyat fi dunya, ariyat fil akhirah. Everybody's ariyat fil akhirah on the Day of Judgment. We now know what that means. The Prophet ﷺ said that people would walk in marketplaces, badiyatul afkhad, with their thighs bare. Civilized people never do that. Primitive people don't create marketplaces. Primitive people barter. They live they don't have marketplaces. That's the difference between civilized, one of the differences between civilized and, so he's talking about people in aswaq, in malls, walking with shorts on. Who told the Prophet ﷺ? I mean, there's so many things that he said. Who told him that destitute Bedouin would be vying with one another to build tall buildings in the Arabian desert? Who told him that all this money would come to the Arabian Peninsula? Who told him that the Arabian Peninsula would be turned into gardens and have green? It was desert. Like, now you go and you can see these amazing gardens. I mean, they actually have skiing in Dubai. Like, they have snow. So all these things, the Prophet ﷺ, he told all these things, and I'm just like, you read the signs of the end of time, and you're like, it's not like Nostradamus, where it has to be interpreted. These are like clear signs. The Prophet ﷺ said that children, he said, al-mataru sayakunu qayda, like rain would be acidic. Qayd means to burn. Who told him about acid rain? And then who told him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about, we know, I'm just saying rhetorically, that these for us, these are all signs. He said, wal waladu ghayda, the child would be filled with rage. Children would be filled with rage. It's amazing. And he said, يَفِيضُ اللِّئَامُ فَيْضًا وَيَغِيظُ الْكِرَامُ غَيْظًا. He said that the low people would be everywhere. And he said noble people would diminish. They would just begin to disappear. He said, how will you be when you're amongst the leftovers of humanity, like the party's over? It's all the crumbs and the scraps. I mean, just look how people dress. Look how people have always dressed nobly throughout human history. Nobody ever dressed like modern people. Nobody in history. Romans had togas. You know, the Persians had their robes. You know, all these people, I mean, even native peoples had their feathers and because they knew, they had some sense of what human beings are. Now people walking around, they walk around they pay hundreds of dollars for rags. They pay hundreds of dollars for rags. What's happened to human beings that this is their state? I mean, you have to marvel at the leftovers. It's just amazing. But there were days, I mean, look, there were days when heroes walked the earth. Like now, they want to, every hero they just have to tear down. Everybody of any distinction, they have to tear them down. They have to destroy them. They have to expose them, show how they're just like everybody else. There's nothing special about them. You know, this is a sickness of people. It's all this leveling. And you know, there were great people, and I've sat with sanctified souls. I know it. I've been in their company. I've been in their presence. I've felt their hal, you know. So these are real. They're real. And the awliya are real. The people of Allah are real. And the lovers of the Prophet ﷺ, they know what they have, and they know what they have in their hearts. And the people that don't have that, they don't know. But Abu Hanifa said, if kings knew what we had, they would send their armies to take it from us. You know, so I mean, I feel sorry for people that don't have that. I really do. And the Quran says, some of them wish they could believe like you believe. So don't realize what you have is precious. Don't squander it. And then people say, you know, I'm having a hard time with my faith. What? Like, what? Have you read history? Like, people used to get sawed in half. Christians were eaten by the lions. You know, I mean, like, what kind of faith do you have that, like, you lost your job and suddenly you don't believe in God? You know, or your child got sick. Who gave you the child in the first place? Like, where did it come from? And how do you know what's good for you and what's bad? How do you know if that child, it's better they leave the world now than stay in the world? You don't know. Who are you to decide these things? All these things, we're people of submission. Our religion, we don't challenge God. We're not people who wrestle with God. You know, musara'at, we don't know. We surrender. Allahu Akbar, I give up. You know, like, don't shoot. And it's because Allah wants good for us. It's like it's sweet surrender. It's not bitter surrender. It's not like I lose. It's you win by surrendering. This is like the opposite of surrendering in dunya. In dunya, you lose when you surrender. In our religion, you win when you surrender. Assalamu alaikum.